Hello, everybody, and welcome to Cut and Splice. This is Gil,
And this is Jason.
And this is Matt.
and today we're going to be discussing Peter Bogdanovich's first movie, Targets, which was released in 1968. We thought about doing this movie a little while back when Bogdanovich passed away, but now we're here talking about it. This is a movie that's the first time that I saw it was in film school. We had a teacher. I think that maybe it was just me that had a teacher, but he was a co-writer on one of Mel Brooks's movies. I think it was Dracula, Dead and Loving It.
Dead and Loving It, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think his name was Steve Haberman. Yeah, yeah. So he was the one who showed us Targets, and he told us the story behind it, which is kind of interesting. So essentially, Peter Bogdanovich kind of got in with the Corman crew, the Roger Corman crew, and was working with them on some productions, and was an up and coming talent. And he gave him like I think it was like about $100,000 or something. He said like here's $100,000, and then there's this footage from this movie. I forget the name of it, but that I want you to use that shows up in Targets, and Boris Karloff owed Roger Corman 3 days of shooting on a contract. So I said like use those three things and make a movie, like write a story around it, and that's what he did, and that's how we got Targets, and apparently Karloff liked the script so much that he ended up doing I think 3 extra days of shooting or something on it, and didn't ask for extra pay because he was so happy to do it. So it's yeah, and it's a very interesting movie for sure.
Gil,
Uh,
just to interject real quick, and I
mhm.
haven't, you can never be too sure about these things, the validity of these things, but I watched this on DVD, and one of my favorite DVDs that I own actually, and they have a Bogdanovich has what they call an intro, but is actually more like a featurette, really, because he talks for a long time, like 10 minutes almost, about the movie. And I don't know if he's remembering it wrong or if whatever, but he claimed that it was he owed them 2 days or something like that, and that Boris Karloff owed them 2 days of filming, and that that they told him just use the footage from, I think it's The Terror or something like that.
Yeah, Terror, I think it's called. Yeah,
Yeah, at least that's what IMDb trivia says. So
yeah,
I don't know. Roger Corman's film The Terror, 1963. I don't know. Anyway,
yeah.
just thought I'd throw that in there.
Which interestingly, in the footage you can see a young Jack Nicholson acts in it.
Yeah.
He's the one at the door, and I saw this in the trivia, but they said that Roger Corman tried to convince Bogdanovich to cast him as the shooter in
Oh wow.
in Targets, and he didn't go for it. And I think it was a smart decision. I mean, because Jack Nicholson does look kind of like a crazy person, whereas I think the casting that he
Yeah.
went with, but it would
Uh,
have been interesting to have the clout of the whole baggage that he would have come with later in his career to like have that
Sure.
in the movie, but that didn't happen. But yeah,
that
but
that
basic, yeah. Mhm.
sorry, that's just something to really delve into after we go into spoilers. But yeah,
Yes,
that,
definitely.
it,
So
it,
yeah, so basically, as usual, we'll do our first bit, short bit about reviewing and recommending and rating, and then we'll go into spoilers. But the
right.
gist of it for people, yeah.
Although
Mhm.
we've already established that there's going to be a shooter in the movie, and that's basically the
Yeah.
entire
Yes.
climax. But
Well, no, I mean,
yeah,
so basically,
but
this that's a good point. Did we mess it up? I don't
No,
know.
You could get that from the trailer and the poster. It's fine.
Yeah,
all right.
basically, I mean, the plot of the movie is that there is a, because it's not the climax. There's a young man who is into guns, and he ends up being a shooter, and there's
Active
a
shooter.
active shooter, and there's a storyline that goes alongside of it of Boris Karloff and director of a movie that he worked on, who was played by Peter Bogdanovich, and basically
Mhm.
these two storylines essentially collide in
Intersect.
some way,
Yeah.
intersect,
I like Collide.
and relate. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's a movie full of symbolism, and it's very very intentional, very much very Citizen Kane of Bogdanovich, being that he was a big fan of Orson Welles and later a good friend of his. So yeah, it's definitely a very, even though it's a very small movie, it's quite dense. It's quite interesting and enjoyable, especially for the low budget that it was. And yeah, I mean my rating for it was 9, and I'm not sure if I might keep it that way. I don't know if it was just overly enthusiastic back then, but I watched a movie in one sitting, which is not something I do much nowadays because I just never have time. It's pretty
Sad.
brief. It's like an hour and a half, and um
Hmm.
and it's solid. I would probably keep that rating.
Interestingly enough, my story with this movie is pretty simple. Um, I think it was gosh, I don't know. Gil, do you remember what year it was? It would have obviously been after we were out of school. Gil, as he had just explained, had seen this movie in class at one point, introduced by this a professor that you had. He just saw that it was going to be part of a two-parter, a double feature at what I believe was the New Beverly, but might have been the Egyptian. I'm not sure. He called me up and said, "Hey, we got to go check out this movie. There's this like Charlton Heston one, which probably sucks, and then there's this other one called Targets, which is really really good. They're both movies about active shooters, and you were like, you're gonna really like this movie. We got to go see it." And I was like, "All right, let's go." And yeah, and you were pretty much right. Even though I don't think the Charlton Heston one sucked, it was just like nothing by comparison to Targets. Targets was way better.
Which one was the Charlton Heston? I don't even
I don't remember what
remember.
it's called. I know it.
Yeah.
I mean, we could look it up right now. It's not
Yeah.
important to the thing. It's a movie with Charlton Heston, and there's a shooter inside of an arena, and it's like it's a big
Oh,
movie, a big like a summer or not a summer blockbuster. That's not the right way.
like
It's
an
just a
action
big
movie.
mainstream movie where you have an ensemble, like an ensemble disaster movie. That's a good way to describe it because it's like all
Yeah,
these
it's
storylines.
starting to come
There's the
back to
couple
me.
that's getting engaged, and then there's the husband and wife that are having troubles, and then there's like all these different little storylines that all resolve one way or another when this shooter starts shooting people. And I mean, it was fine,
Hmm.
whatever. It's a forgettable movie, you know. but
Yeah.
but Targets, when we watched that, we were like talking about it all the whole way home, and I was like, wow, I'm so glad you introduced me to this movie. And now, of course, years later, um, I found out that it's one of the hardest movies to find on DVD, and I found it in a used. Oh no, I did not find it in any of the used DVD stores that I frequent, but I did manage to just find a copy on eBay of all places for only like $20, and I was really happy to have found that because it's pretty difficult to get your hands on an authentic copy of it.
Yeah, and now it's available for streaming for like 2.99.
Yeah, if you don't care about tangible media.
Yeah, which I don't, but that's.
I know.
What about you, Matt? Like, what was so for you? It was the first time watching it, right?
Yeah.
Ooh,
I, yeah, it was, and uh, I'm going to save most of what I have to say for the spoiler
okay.
section because honestly, about 15 minutes in, I was just like, okay, this is totally this thing. And after I watched the movie and looked it up, I was able to confirm, yeah, it is totally this thing that the movie is talking about.
So Matt's gonna spoil some shit.
Yeah.
Sp- Suppose. Well, he'll spoil when it's necessary. Um,
But anybody listening, uh, the cinematographer on the movie was Laszlo Kovacs. And I met Laszlo Kovacs like 6 months before he died. And he was a great guy. And I love his work. And I loved his work on another movie that Bogdanovich directed, Paper Moon and everything. And I am going to immediately bump this movie up a bit just because I love Laszlo Kovacs. Uh, so I'm just going to agree with Gil. It's probably a 9 for me.
Wow.
I mean, it's not that I have a massive boner for this movie. It's just that, okay, yeah, I do. It's just really good,
And there's definitely a lot to admire about it, like from all the
right?
components for sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
From
uh,
the camera work to the direction to the ingenuity of like the production to make things happen
yeah.
to
Yeah, I was going to talk about that too.
I might have bumped it up like a half star just because it's Laszlo Kovacs. I love Laszlo Kovacs, and I wish that he were still with us. And I mean, I met him on the same day that I met Vilmos Zsigmond, and they're both brilliant people. And yeah, fuck, that guy did some brilliant stuff with this movie. So,
Well, before we do any of the other stuff,
yeah,
did you guys? I mean, uh, this is sadly, it's very sad to say, the only Bogdanovich film that I've seen. Although I'm very much looking forward to seeing several of his others. I was hoping to see one today before we did this, just so I could talk about something else that he's done. But have you guys seen his other films? And if so, how do you place them compared to this one? Because this was also his first feature, I think.
yes, it was. I saw recently. I saw Paper Moon, and I was not impressed. Like I liked it. I know that I think the young actress Tatum O'Neal, I think she won the Oscar, and I think it was nominated for a few things, but
Yeah.
I didn't think it was as good as people make it out to be. But it's not bad. Uh, and then I saw his big one, the one that really made him
the
big,
Last
the
Picture Show.
Last Picture Show. And
Yeah.
also, I don't know, like it's kind of like Diner, and like it's those types of movies, like where it's like the coming of age thing of a bunch of teenagers, like in a very specific town in a very specific moment in their lives, and they're all making this transition, and it's very forgettable. I honestly don't remember anything from that movie. It's that I just remember that Sybil Shepherd is in it, and Jeff Bridges. Apart from that, I have no recollection of a single plot line in that movie. That's how forgettable it is. Um,
Wow.
so I would rank that lower than Paper Moon, and then the only other one I saw, which was not terrible, was of all the ones that he's made, it's like an odd one, but he's made one. It's because I listened to a whole podcast. There's a podcast with this like film reviewer. He did like a whole season of interviewing Peter Bogdanovich, and they went movie by movie and talking about all his movies. So
Nice.
of all his movies, that the one that interested me is he made a movie in Singapore. Wow, what was it? Like it was in the 70s. Saint Jack,
Yeah,
I
Saint
think.
Jack.
Yeah.
Yeah, Saint Jack. It was interesting because like it was also, it felt like almost like Targets. He went to Singapore with a ragtag team of filmmakers, and he kind of like made this movie with Ben Gazzara and stuff, and it's interesting. But the main thing for me with Bogdanovich, it really feels like that he's an amateur wannabe filmmaker, but just a really really good one. Like it always feels like his movies are tapering on this like just below professionalism. I really feel like Target is the only one where he kind of nailed it. He was imitating Hitchcock. There's a whole thing about, I think he he told it's something with Roger Corman, and he said something about like, should we do it like a Hitchcock movie or like a Howard Hawks movie? And he said like, well, Hitchcock was very efficient, so shoot like Hitchcock. And it's very
Mhm.
Hitchcockian, and it shows like there's a lot of tracking shots and revealing pieces of
Yeah.
information. It's really good, but he's sort of like a poor man's Scorsese. Like he's such a student of cinema, but he never actually graduated. He never actually became like a, to me personally, like all the movies of his that I've seen, they're like attempts at making a movie and they succeed to some degree. Target is by far the best one, but even that one looks amateurish. It's just that it looks like a great amateuristic movie. Like it's
Yeah.
as if like an amazing student filmmaker made that movie or something. Yeah, that's so
Yeah.
that's my ranking. I guess like a Saint Jack, I would put maybe right above Paper Moon or neck to neck. So those are the four that I've seen this
Okay.
far.
Cool.
I mean, I can't really rank his movies all that well. I mean, the funny thing is, the night that I met Laszlo Kovacs, they actually did screen a scene from Paper Moon that was struck from the original 35 millimeter negative, and they actually just showed the print from the original 35 millimeter negative. And it's funny, because every time I watch Paper Moon, even when I'm watching it digitally, even when I'm watching it streaming, even when I'm watching it on DVD, I'm still back in that room in the AFI and watching that magic happen. And so I'm kind of biased toward that. But I mean, the last big movie it looks like this guy made was Mask.
Yeah.
And uh, honestly, I haven't seen it. So,
I
you
didn't see
know,
that one either. My a friend of mine
uh,
said that his career is very heavily front loaded.
yeah. Well, sadly, it's the same. It's the same thing for Laszlo Kovacs. I mean, his career kind of teetered off toward the end. I mean, like his last, Laszlo Kovacs's last movie was 2 weeks Notice, and that was just after Miscongeniality.
Okay.
I mean, I think
So
it just happens. I think it just happens that people, because a lot of people start out as fans. Like we're fans of
yeah,
movies, and that's why we got into movies. And a lot of them are very talented and don't succeed, and some of them are somewhat talented and succeed. Like they're able to get their foot in the door one way or another, whether it's their personality or something. They get a shot, and then they're like, they're good. They're not great, but they're good. But they're not bad. They have good intentions. They're very thoughtful. They're movie lovers. But you just see that it's not there. It's not there completely. It's all very honest and a good attempt, but so eventually you just run out of steam unless you have very good scripts coming at you and you work with very good people that elevate your work.
mhm,
You can't run on that. You'll run out of creative gas very quickly. It's not
yeah,
like Paul Thomas Anderson or Tarantino that everything is like a slam dunk because they just have like a once in a generation talent.
Yeah.
yeah. Are we going to go into spoilers
Might
or?
as well.
Yeah,
Did you rate it, Jason? Like,
Oh, sorry. Um, I I would have probably said an 8 or a 9 if you'd asked me last week. I was just trying to like remember from the one time I saw it in theaters with you. Um, and today I was trying to decide what I thought about it, and obviously we can go into more of that later. Um, and there was a number of things I found a little disappointing when I rewatched it this time. But I don't really think it's fair to really say that any of them were really anything that damaged the movie in any way. Like it brought it down that much. So yeah, I mean, I pretty much. It's a strange kind of horror movie, if you want to call it that. And that's kind of my favorite kind of horror movie, are the ones that are so different than all the others. And I don't know, it's definitely one of like in that regard, it's like one of the best I've ever seen. So yeah, I don't know. It's like probably 8.5 or 9. It's pretty great.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of like a Midsommar in a way, that movie that came out recently.
I didn't see it.
You didn't see it, but it's basically it's the second Ari Aster movie that was essentially a classic horror movie in broad daylight. He basically took the generic plot of horror like movies, including the person that walks away and then never comes back. Like all the tropes are there. It's just that it's built around a Scandinavian cult in broad daylight with white clothing. It's the complete opposite of what every horror movie is, which is dark black,
Yeah.
in the shadows. And anyway, so yeah, and same thing with The Shining. The Shining was another horror movie that was basically almost flat lit most of the movie. Because like the
Yeah.
scary part is human psychology, not the lighting or the ghosts. It's the alcoholic dad that's the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was always the fundamental intrigue, and the fundamental payoff of the movie was that there is this character who represents the real evil that we actually experience in real life, and eventually there is this connection at the end of this person who has represented what we view as evil, what we can see at the skin deep level as evil, and those two characters colliding. That like there is, in so many ways, it is easy for us to look at Nosferatu and see, okay, that is someone, a being that I do not want to be around. It's easy for us to process that while also experiencing a certain level of fear, which is in a way comfortable. Like we are afraid of that, but we're comfortable fearing that. We know that we can get away from that very easily. Whereas the shooter in the movie, like, he's somebody who flies under the radar. He's the guy that throws $5 on the counter at your local convenience store and just buys a Red Bull, and you don't think about it. He's nobody. And then
He's
suddenly,
not Jack Nicholson.
right, and actually, that's a good segue. He Jack Nicholson would have been too imposing a presence, I think, for that role. I think that if Jack Nicholson was being Jack Nicholson and he was playing the shooter, we would be looking at this role and thinking, oh, wow, that crazy-eyed guy turned out to be a crazy shooter. Who would have thunk it? No.
Although
It had.
I would say though, just a quick thing is that thinking about that, I was realizing that some of the shooters, when you look at photos of them, and this is more when they're in jail after, but they kind of look nuts. At least half of them. The other half look very boring. But
I think more than half.
yeah, but for the purpose of the movie, I think to make that point that you're illustrating, I think was necessary. Yes.
Well, that also gets into my other point that I was pushing away, that this is very clearly a movie about the Texas bell tower shooter.
Yeah. That
Like
Bogdanovich talks about that in his intro thing, that he wanted to make a movie about that.
right. And Charles Whitman is basically the same guy that was portrayed in this movie, in that he was kind of that normal guy. You know, he was a military veteran. He was trustable. He was, uh, you know, he had a family. He had a wife. He had so many things going for him, and he just went fucking nuts.
Just like in the movie, he killed his wife and mother, and then
Right,
ceremoniously tucked them in bed.
right, exactly. That's why. That's why. You know, again, 30 minutes through the movie, I was just like, okay, this is Charles Whitman. Yeah, like I don't know if the filmmakers or anybody involved knew that Charles Whitman, you know, like had a brain tumor that just like that did just drive him nuts, that, you know, actually drove him to do what he did while they were making the movie. But I mean, yeah, that was kind of an interesting aspect of the film, was that, you know, yeah, I mean, it was very clearly about Charles Whitman without being about Charles Whitman. You know,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. Anyway, uh,
Yeah.
pick me apart.
Yeah, no, I think that's very true, and it's good to note we mentioned about the ingenuity, the whole thing of him shooting people on the freeway. Apparently, they didn't get a permit to shoot on the 405, and they had to essentially communicate with the or time something with drivers and tell crew members who were like sitting in the cars and driving to like make it as if they were shot, and they had very long telephoto lenses to capture that. So it is interesting how they managed to make that whole thing, that which has a lot of production value, happen,
Yeah.
the actual shootings.
He was saying in the featurette that that it was 100% MOS and all guerrilla. They didn't have any permit for any of it, and he was giving a ton of credit to the sound editor for the movie, because he said, like, at first when you watch all that stuff without any of that, it's every single thing you're hearing in the whole scene is all just stuff they put in afterward. And he says it's like one of his favorite parts of the movie.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm just amazed that the 405 was ever moving like that.
True.
Yeah, and I guess
Very
that
true.
leads into the second thing, the other component of what the movie is trying to say is that the role of the symbolism of the car in the movie as also some sort of force of evil. I actually, just thinking about it again, if you watch this movie in the context of today, the modern car is social media. So in the movie, cars are portrayed as this thing that isolates people, that puts us in boxes,
Oh
that
yeah, there's that
takes
line
off the.
that he talks about when they first get to the movie theater, the drive-in movie theater.
What does he say?
I didn't pick up on any of that, but yeah, when they get to the drive-in movie theater, the movie's been playing for a little bit. It's already well underway, and they say, "Oh, you don't have to stop the movie." He says, "We're just gonna go watch it until you're ready for me to go up on and do the presentation, whatever." So they pull up with his limo, and him and Jenny are watching the movie, and he kind of looks to his left and looks at all the cars, and he looks at her, and there's a point where he very poignantly says, "Boy, it's really different when you can't hear their reactions."
Yes, that's definitely one line that's very specifically pushing for that, to continue that symbolism. And there's also when they're driving when they're driving through the neighborhood, through Ventura Boulevard or whatever, to get to the wherever the theater is. Um,
Sita.
the Reseda, yeah, whatever. But in any case, they keep driving past car dealerships, and he laments how the neighborhood has changed and now it's all car dealerships and it's disgusting. And it's sort of like how when TV came out, people felt like it was the enemy or something. So when cars were taking over LA at that time, because it started in the 50s where it was a boom of freeways and everything. In the 60s, it really just exploded. Like, every family had two vehicles or something all of a sudden. And so there's this idea of, like, instead of going on subways like in New York or trains or buses and having a communal experience, or in the theater as well, everything is like you're in a car, you're in a drive-in, you're not actually feeling the energy of people around you. So everything is compartmentalized. And the disconnect between that is why we create these shooters. Like, that's the argument of the movie, is that that disconnect that's why we don't sense when there's a shooter. And again, I do think the modern equivalent of that is social media, where people sometimes get radicalized, whether it's like the whole ISIS thing that happened, but even that, like with the far right, groups. But even that aside, there's always the lone gunman as well. It's a combination of all those things. It's probably why there's more of them now than in the past, just because there's just so much various ways to get radicalized. But in the movie specifically, I think the cars is one of the arguments, that the cars are like destroying society. And in the end, and that's the big reveal, is like the cars becomes their graves. They get shot in the cars, they can't escape. And the final shot of the movie is all the speaker boxes in the like the wide shot of the drive-in. It looks like a graveyard. So that's basically the whole thread of the movie, is built on the what the car symbolizes, and then the part that Matt spoke about with the horror, that there's the defined horror. Like, we know when we see Dracula or Frankenstein, that they're monsters from the movies. They're the bad people. Although the monster of Frankenstein is not, even Dracula, they're not
Yeah.
actually specifically evil. They're actually complex. But meaning that, like, it's very black and white.
Yeah.
Whereas the shooter, modern day horror, is to be shot by, a member of your own community, is a horror that you can't anticipate, and it's that much more scary. But then when Karloff walks up to him and sees this wimpy little kid cuddling himself in a corner, is like this is what we're afraid of. This is the modern day horror. Like, that's depressing. The fact that,
It's
like,
pathetic.
it's pathetic. Yeah. But yeah, no, it's a powerful. The whole thing is just the way it's put together is really powerful. It's one of those rare movies that kind of nails it. Like, it's
I
the. Mhm.
I was just going to say, I don't know about you guys. I've had many discussions with people about what type of horror movie they prefer. I know many people who, you know, whether this is true or not, it's just what they were claiming. But I know a lot of people who either expressed a preference or were just kind of boasting that they didn't find horror movies effective or scary or something like that. And they would say, like, they can watch anything like aliens or like something with ghosts or anything like that, anything supernatural. And they said it doesn't really affect them in any way, but they said they get very nervous and scared or whatever, affected, let's just say, by stuff like slasher films or a movie like this that's about a shooter out of control, and stuff like that. just because to them they said that's something that they can just imagine could easily happen in their lifetime, whereas the other not so much. But I think probably a lot of people out there, myself being one of them, find it much more interesting, at least. I would, not to make it too simplified, but I would side with Boris Karloff in this one. I prefer movies about more fantastical things if they're going to try to make a intriguing horror film kind of thing. I like when there's some sort of element of something a little more supernatural involved, but I think it's really, when it comes down to it, even though the movie's making a really interesting point, it does at least speak to a very simple question of just preference of like what you kind of what works for you.
Honestly, I went into this knowing that at least certain outlets had given it like a horror label as a genre.
Yeah.
And I came out of this thinking, where the fuck is this a horror movie? I
It's
mean,
definitely more of a serial killer movie than
no, no,
a horror movie for sure.
I mean, it's just I don't see how that label actually fits. It's
Well,
just
that's more of a discussion of
right.
genre and stuff like that at that point.
And IMDb, by the way, has it
Like,
as crime, drama, thriller. It doesn't have it as horror.
yeah, I know. Some other outlets have. I think
Because of the Boris Karloff connection, that's what it was, a modern day horror.
Yeah.
But again, the modern day horror is a serial killer movie.
I'm sure there's plenty of people who would consider the helplessness of all the people in the drive-in during the final sequence of this movie to be really scary, especially at the time when they didn't have a lot of stuff that we, the last, let's just say, 50 years of movies and stuff, but to go off of. But
yeah, there's definitely some blood there in the.
Well, I mean, that one of, not to get sidetracked from what we were just talking about, but one of the things I was going to say disappointed me about the movie is that while I definitely don't want it to be gory or exploitative or anything like that, I mean, this is a violent movie, and it's about a guy with a rifle, a 30-06 that he's like shooting into a crowd of people. I mean, I really think there should have been more blood. I mean, I don't want puddles or anything, but like
a Tarantino level.
Yeah, nothing like that. But like, there's a moment where there's like a terrified child sitting in the front seat of a sedan, and the camera slowly pans to the and it reveals that his father in the driver's seat, his head is just kind of cocked backwards, and he's just lifeless and still. And there's like a little fingerprint of blood on his neck. If that's an entry wound, there should be blood all over that seat. I mean, it's a pretty big bullet.
Yeah, although that is some of the most horrific stuff in the movie is when you see that kids are essentially damaged for life in that moment, essentially.
Yeah.
If they're seeing their parents like die in front of them.
I also think Jenny gets shot. She gets wounded. She gets winged in the shoulder or something.
Mm-hmm.
I was a little weirded out that she didn't scream. She didn't make any sound at all. And so I kind of like, that was one of the things that frustrated me, because I was like, well, I guess I can make up the excuse for it and say that she kind of just went into shock or something. But I think if we're expected to believe that, we should have gotten like a close up of her face so that it showed that it was intentionally that she, got shot and didn't make a sound and was just like, shell shocked, just kind of sitting there or whatever. But instead, we're just kind of left to like, okay, that happened.
Yeah. No, it's definitely is an interesting mix of elements in this movie. And not to get too much into the gun debate, especially because Matt is very gung ho about his guns lately. But there was a touch. There was a touch there, like when he goes to the gun store, is like this was a bit too easy for this guy to get all that ammunition. Yeah, they could have limited a bit, number of, especially he didn't have the money and they put it on his dad's credit. The whole thing was a bit too, like, yeah, if you want to say like about like, access to guns, access to ammunition is like, you know, something could have been done there to slow this guy down. But it doesn't mean that he wouldn't have found another way to make it happen.
Yeah. The
Ah,
I don't know if oh, go ahead, Matt.
no, you go ahead.
I was just going to mention that in the I don't know how much validity there is to this, because I've heard other directors make similar claims and I didn't really believe them, but it could just be a matter of opinion. But in that featurette, Bogdanovich was talking about how he showed the movie to a number of places, and just everybody seemed to love it, and there was every indication that it was going to be incredibly successful. And then he said that before they could release the movie, Martin Luther King and I think Bobby Kennedy or somebody were both assassinated pretty close to each other in time, and it just made like half the the distribution companies, it just a lot of their options dried up. And he said when they finally did release it, it didn't make any money.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it being a tough sell. I mean, it's a small movie. There's no big names in it except for Boris Karloff, which is an aging actor. Yeah, I mean, I think most Roger Corman movies don't tend to, they tend to be kind of like B movies and such.
Yeah.
But yeah, but that's why this movie has like a long shelf life as far as like, I mean, hopefully people seek it out, and if not, you should now.
But
Uh,
it's such a
hopefully you've
good,
seen it by now
it's
if
such a
you're listening to
relevant
this
movie
one.
of the times right now, I think.
Yeah, like I said, the social media definitely can be related to it, and I'm sure a lot of people in the gun debate too, and
Well,
there's
it's
a lot
just
of
the fact that
shooting.
regardless of where you stand on the issue, it's kind of irrelevant. It's just the sheer fact that these there are big massacres and mass shootings that take place, and it's a big conversation that goes on.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter where your feelings are on it. It's a pretty relevant movie.
Yeah, and I do think the movie doesn't lean heavily on the access question. There's like a small scene about it, but the movie, the overall point of the movie is that the main issue is the deterioration of community, like the whole car
Yeah.
thing, like
Hmm.
Yeah.
whatever device you want to come up with that makes these young men alienated and act out their aggression through shooting people.
Yeah.
It's that's the thing really to solve more than anything. And I don't know if it's possible. It seems like it might always be an issue, specifically in this society, more so than most countries, that it's an issue. It's tough to explain it, but I guess this movie tries.
In other words, it's for anyone who's never seen it, the movie doesn't get bogged down in any politics or anything. It's just a really good movie that really portrays what it's talking about and kind of leaves you with lots of thoughts.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I don't think there's any one solution for sure. Like the
Yeah.
yeah.
Right. And I mean, if there is, I mean, I don't want to make this a political conversation, but
Do
I mean,
it.
again, the fact that this is basically like a clone stamp of the Charles Whitman thing. I mean, again, like Charles Whitman was exactly the kind of guy who should pass every background check, who should have been able to, get whatever he wanted. I mean, like the guy was a fucking Marine. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not one of those things where you're talking about an 18-year-old who has had mental health problems going into a gun shop and buying a $2,000 rifle, which really actually doesn't happen, very often. Uh, I mean, this is based upon a story of somebody who was a model citizen, and that's what makes it so horrifying. That's what makes it such a good movie. Is that
Was
this is sorry?
no, go ahead.
Go ahead. No,
Oh no, no.
I
I
think
mostly was gonna clarify. Wasn't Charles Whitman? Wasn't he? Didn't have the whole like tumor thing like that was discovered later, or was that a different shooter?
no, yeah, it was Charles Whitman who had a brain tumor.
Yeah.
That was discovered after he. It's actually funny. He was stationed at uh, Camp Lejeune, which even to this day they're filing lawsuits against them because of water contamination that was causing tumors.
Damn.
So yeah, so uh, yeah, I mean he is a perfect example of somebody that like we just could never, through any red flag law, through any background check or anything like that, stop this guy from getting a gun because, well, he was like he was an upstanding citizen until he got a brain tumor that might have been caused by the government and went nuts and killed a bunch of people. So, yeah, uh,
Yeah. And in the
I,
movie, there's no sign of that. They don't really give much of an explanation, except for the disconnect in society and all that.
well,
Well, I think that's what they were going for, right? Like you
Yeah, yeah,
said,
yeah.
that's the point they're trying to make.
I did
Like, but maybe at
really,
that point, when he wrote the script, like they didn't discover yet the whole brain tumor with. I mean, I think he left a note, right? So I mean, I think
yeah,
it might have been known at the time.
I did really like that scene where Bobby in the movie, right, the shooter in the movie, Bobby was talking to his wife the night before he went on his
Yeah,
rampage, and was just saying, I feel like I need to talk to you,
yeah.
and just saying I'm having these thoughts.
That plays really well into what Gil was saying too. That's
Yeah,
another scene where they're trying to show society's isolation. In this case, not with a car, but specifically just kind of, I mean, she's been working nights, you know. So
yeah,
when he gets back from his job, she's leaving shortly after to start her job, and then so that they're showing that isolation, like what Gil was talking about.
Yeah, that he
yeah.
doesn't have someone to talk to. Although, yeah, he's got the parents. Did you? I don't know why this. Every time I watch this movie, I forget. But I always like the fact that they all live in the same house.
It's weird.
Oh, always throws me off. It's like, is this his sister? And then like there, it seems like is he hitting on his sister? I was like, oh no, it's his wife. Like the three times I've watched this movie, every time I'm like, I think it's a sister, and then I realize that it's a wife. But I guess it's possible young couples lived with the
I mean,
or
they say that he's got
parents.
an older brother who's got kids and is not living at home.
Well, I mean, he kills his older brother in the movie, right?
No, that person was a delivery man.
Oh, I okay. I thought that was his brother. Okay.
I don't think so. The If
Uh,
you listen to the mom, it's like she's not on screen. It's just a um, not voiceover. What do you call it? Whatever, off screen voice thing. She When he's typing the thing or whatever, I think she yells something to the wife character, and she says, "Oh, that such and such just arrived," or something like that. Whatever.
oh, okay.
There is that moment with the wife where he tells her like to call in sick or something, like to call that she can't make it or something because he wants to spend time with her, and then she said that
Yeah.
she can't do it, and that's another thing where like there's that disconnect. But I guess at the time there wasn't that whole thing about shooters being incels and all that, that
Mhm.
like they tend to be loners, because to me the profile of this guy just doesn't seem very likely. The Yeah, being a part of a wholesome family is fine. That could still be a shooter, but it's surprising that he would have a wife. But I guess if they live at home with the parents, maybe he feels stuck. Maybe he feels like inadequate as a husband, that he hasn't been able to provide. Like I'm trying to rationalize like what's the idea of the setup there, because like to me it would have made more sense if he didn't have a wife.
Well, I think there's two things to that. One is that he Bogdanovich like openly said he wanted to make a movie about what's his name, Whitman.
Oh, and
Yeah.
he had a wife.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Charles
and
Whitman.
Whitman
Yeah.
shot and killed his wife and his mother the morning before he did the bell tower shooting or whatever it was.
Yeah, there's definitely something shocking about the fact that it's one thing to kill strangers. That's why he had a
Yeah.
tumor. Like he wasn't thinking rationally. He just like went on a rampage. Like to kill strangers, fine. Like you're trying to like just empower yourself in some sort of twisted way. But to kill your parents and your wife, yeah, that's crazy. I mean, people don't get along with their wives and their parents, but still, I just it feels like weird.
Oh, sorry, that was the other part I was going to mention. I was trying to remember where my brain was going with that. Aside from the fact that he's trying to openly make like a, what would you call it? Not an homage, but he's trying to make a story about Whitman, and that was I think a very specific point he wanted to cover, was that he killed the mother and the wife before he went on the rampage, or I should say at the start of the rampage maybe, and then ceremoniously tucked them in bed and all that weird stuff. I mean, I don't know for sure, but my thought was when I was watching is that I think that him having a wife and them showing scenes of him having a very wholesome family is just to kind of underscore the point that they're making. I mean, I don't want to say the terror, but the fact that it's not um some loner guy. They're trying to make it like this could be anybody. It's not that he's sex deprived. It's not that he is attention deprived. It's, well, they are trying to show that isolation thing, but that he seems on the outside to be a completely normal person. But then they're trying to make this point about how in our society itself, with cars and everything else, are slowly isolating us more and more and more, even within our own normal lives.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that for sure, and it is more shocking when he kills this
Yeah, more
family.
shocking.
Yeah, no, it's
Um,
Mhm.
I was going to say, I think the oneers are really effective.
Oh
They
yeah.
they seem to be more on the first half of the movie, just to kind of build a lot of tension and stuff. Um, but like you said, I'm sure that's a lot of that Hitchcockian influence, probably. One thing we didn't talk about at all, very little anyway, was that Bogdanovich plays the director.
yeah, I mentioned that
Yeah.
we
Yeah,
didn't cover it
I know you
too
mentioned
far.
it. Yeah, I was just gonna
Yeah.
say, like, I don't know about you guys, but I like that. So this is the second time I'd ever seen this movie, right? Um, I completely forgot that they open with the scene from one of his other previous movies, and they're like watching, you're watching an existing, um, you know, Boris Karloff film and everything, and then the credits roll, and it's a viewing room, like for dailies, basically.
Mhm.
And of course, they start with the what is it? It's not a producer, but like a studio head or somebody just like trashing the movie, basically. And like that's when um, Boris Karloff's character, whatever his name is, when he says he's going to quit, and everybody freaks out and whatever. I remember when I was watching this time, I was like, wow, I forgot that they had that opening like that in this movie. I remembered that Karloff is playing a version of himself where he's this iconic horror actor who's like way past his prime, and his movies aren't making a lot of money anymore, and so on and so forth. But I forgot the way that they kind of did all that, and it's like I just thought it's interesting that like here's the director is in the movie or in the room with him when he says this, and it's a director he's worked with a bunch of times. And I thought, well, if anybody's going to be trying to get him to stay and not leave, it would be the director, right? I'm surprised that he like left the room and whatever. But then, sure enough, he follows him outside and he's trying to plead with him not to go and all this stuff. And I'd kind of forgotten that halfway through this movie, he's going to show up in that hotel room and they're going to get drunk together. And I don't know about you guys. I think that's like some of the most fun in the whole movie is watching. I think they have this like great little chemistry as the director and actor that they've collaborated with so many times. And they have this great like back and forth with each other.
I'm not sure if they've collaborated too many times, but I think he's like the up and coming. He's basically, it's all meta because he's the up and coming talent like he was when he made this movie.
Yeah,
And the
well, he
movies-
says, doesn't he say? He said he has a line. He says something like they haven't collaborated too much. They've done like 2 movies or something. But he says
maybe
he
two.
says like he says something like that. I guess those weren't movies that he cared about. The director. He's like, I wrote this garbage that you did this movie and this movie, and now that I finally have a great script, you're retired.
Yeah, and he says how like it's not a heavy or a horror,
Right,
like
yeah.
part. It's like something completely different. The movie he's pitching is Targets.
It's super meta.
That's the movie he's
like, I
pitching.
mean, this is one more reason why everyone should watch this movie. It's so of the time now. You know, when
No,
when
it's
everybody's
really
making movies
fun.
like that.
I mean, it's just brilliant. Like it's one of those to me. That's why I keep using the Citizen Kane thing on many episodes because it is the Citizen Kane of movies. But it's like when you have like a first movie that's just so inventive and so clever and so sophisticated and also has so much going for it, like as far as substance and themes, and it all kind of gets weaved together really well. It's tremendous. It's easily his best movie. It's amazing to me that like doesn't get as much attention as it should. It's criminal.
Yeah. I mean, if he's to be believed, if his interpretation of events, I should say, not to imply that he's lying or anything, but yeah, like he said, he felt like it was on the road to be a very successful release, but then Martin Luther King and Kennedy both got shot.
Yeah, but I mean, like after like Last Picture Show came out and Paper Moon, like people should have been rediscovering this movie.
I agree.
And it should have had a second life in classic Hollywood movies of the late '60s, and it doesn't.
Well, wouldn't it have been a lot harder back then because of the lack of home video and stuff?
Yeah, although that was coming up, like I think like late '70s or something. But in any case, it's
early 80s or
'80s.
I don't know.
I mean, I
guess it was the '80s.
My impression is that we were privileged with VHSs by being born in the '80s. So yeah, I doubt that home video was really an outlet for a movie like this.
I'm reading here that JVC released the first VHS machines in Japan let's say in the United States in mid 1977. So I would think it would probably be in full swing by about 1980.
Early '80s. So. Yeah. No, but what I would say is like when people talk Bogdanovich, they always say like, oh, Last Picture Show, Paper Moon.
Yeah.
Nobody mentions Targets. Like Targets is almost like it's like PTA's like Sydney or Hard Eight, whatever name you want to give it. Like it's the movie that came before Boogie Nights that nobody remembers.
It's criminally underrated.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's way better than Hard Eight. It's
Haven't seen it.
it's his Boogie Nights. I mean, a lot of people consider Boogie Nights to be like PTA's best movie. I don't, but it's like that good.
It's my Boogie Nights is my second favorite of his films.
It's very, very good. It's definitely his. I mean, well, There Will Be Blood is his Citizen Kane, but like before he had There Will Be Blood, then yeah, definitely his Citizen Kane was Boogie Nights, like the movie where he just crammed everything into and kind
Yeah.
of made his mark. Yeah, I think one last thing I would say, maybe I can work that in there as an ending, is when they're in the hotel, they're watching a Howard Hawks movie where he
Oh yeah,
directed Boris
yeah,
Yeah.
Karloff. And yeah, and then that was like another like moment of like Peter Bogdanovich kind of showing his fandom and
yeah.
stuff. Yeah, so I think all
I
those
like that
touches.
scene because I like it's I don't know, to me it rings so true of a a jaded actor,
Mm,
even a great actor, but still like a jaded actor and a director who, by nature is a great appreciator of film and he's drunk too, which helps the scene even more because he's sitting at the table, they're watching the Howard Hawks film, and he sits down close to it, and Karloff is trying to say something of meaning to him, and he just keeps going like, no, no. I want to see this part. Look how great you are. Look at he's trying to praise him, and he's just kind of like trying to brush it off, like yeah, okay, whatever. He's like no. This scene so good. Oh, so good.
yeah, it's and he's like, oh boy, could he tell a story? It's
Mm.
like the whole thing of like, yeah, which kind of shows how, yeah, basically he was a big admirer of great directors and great movies, and he nailed it on this one, but I feel like it was just like, I guess, had a bit of a Shyamalan thing going
I'm
there too,
curious to
burnt
see
too
his
hard.
other movies. I'm gonna watch a few of them and see.
Yeah, there's a few of them that I'm curious about seeing. There's the one, I think They All Laughed, something called.
I'm not sure.
Um, and there's What's Up, Doc. He's got like movies where like he was basically doing like specific styles. Like he was trying to, like, I think What's Up, Doc was supposed to be kind of like a screwball comedy. Um, and uh, and They All Laughed was like an ensemble piece. Yeah, and I think also Daisy Miller was, yeah, he had like a few movies there that yeah, Nickelodeon I think failed miserably something. Um, that's when he tried something completely different than Saint Jack. But yeah, he just had a few movies that had some, like, it was a hit and miss even with his early movies. But yeah,
Well,
I don't
right
know.
after Targets, he was I guess he was forced to do a movie that he cared so little about that he didn't want himself credited. So under an assumed name, he did the movie Voyage to the Planet of Prehistoric Women.
Oh yeah, that probably was with Roger Corman right before
I
I
would have
wonder.
to assume.
Yeah. Um, one funny thing, I mean, not super funny, but the when he was working on the script for Paper Moon, he asked Orson Welles, it's like what he thought about the title, and Orson Welles told them something like, that title is so good, you shouldn't even make the picture. You should just release the title, or something like that. It's like. It's like the title is like the best thing about the script.
That's funny. I actually remember when I was at the AFI and uh, they screened that one scene from Paper Moon that was struck from the negative, and Lazo Kovacs was talking about how they shot it on. They shot it using a red filter at night. Okay, Gil probably knows this. Jason, you might not.
I'm listening.
Uh, 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 I mean, a red filter on black and white film takes away about 2 stops of light
Okay.
when you're shooting it. So they're shooting at night and 200 ISO black and white Kodak film in the 60s. So you know it, it, it's slow film,
Yeah.
and it's funny because I'm watching this sequence from Paper Moon that was struck from the original camera negative, and I am just entranced. And that scene ends, and they go back to the panel, and they go to Laszlo Kovacs, and all Laszlo Kovacs could say is like, "It's still too grainy. It's too grainy." I will always obsess, upon the scene because it's just too grainy, and I'm just remembering this as like a sophomore in college, looking
Well,
at it, thinking like, no, the grain is the soul.
there you go.
But I will never forget that night. It's, uh, I just thought it was gorgeous, and he was still beating the shit out of himself. So, like, what, 50 years later? But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I guess one last thing I'll say about Bogdanovich, since he did pass away, is apparently I never saw The Sopranos, but he had like a kind of like a second life there, where he had a
Yeah.
recurring role in that show,
Uh,
and he basically more than anything just was just doing a lot of like little acting roles here and there.
I saw that he did like an episode or two of Entourage, I think.
Yeah, How I Met Your
uh,
Mother,
Yeah, I
he
did one
did
episode of
one.
How I Met Your Mother.
Yeah, he's basically always been around. He had like a very interesting history too, like the yeah, when he like his wife was like as the production designer, I think, or something on his first few movies. Then they got divorced and shifted away from her, and it was like it's all very interesting stuff. Like he burned too hot, was too fancy of or enjoyed too much of the fame and everything, and he had the affair with Sybil Shepherd and stuff. And I think he ended up his life like living in the valley in some condo with I think his I don't know if it was like I think it was the sister of one of his wives or something. It's just interesting lives that these people lead, like where you can be on top of the world and like winning Oscars. And yeah, it's just such a weird Hollywood is such a weird animal. What it
Um,
does to
yeah.
people.
yeah, my friend Steven was just talking to me about this because I told him that we were going to be doing this movie, talking about this movie, and he was saying he described it as I thought this was interesting. He said something to the effect of Bogdanovich's career in a lot of ways mirrored two other famous filmmakers' careers. One of them being, of course, Orson Welles, and that he kind of was front heavy and like front loaded with his quality films and everything. Then the other one being Polanski, in that
Oh,
his wife met a horrific death, I think, at some point, and it really affected his his movies, I think, in a certain way.
oh, Polanski made great movies after she passed. It's just that he, yeah.
You look at the movies he was making, it
Oh,
definitely
the movies
took a
got
pretty
really
dark
depressing
turn.
for
Yeah,
sure.
and
Yeah, no, for sure. He definitely changed his point of view. I mean, he was always pretty dark, but he went
yeah,
full dark
full
after.
dark.
Yeah, yeah,
But
but the
that'll happen to you.
quality didn't diminish.
No, certainly not. Certainly not.
Yeah,
Just really depressing stuff.
yeah, yeah. That's definitely interesting. And Orson Welles too. Like he never really. dip that much. It's just that he really he's the mother of all burning hot. Like
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
to start with Citizen Kane and any other movie after that, like you're not gonna. And yes, none of his other movies were considered classics, but I mean, Touch of Evil, borderline, I would say a
Pretty great
classic.
movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, like they're all good. All his movies are very good. It's just that none of them are. They're not like slam dunks in the John Ford, Howard Hawks, some of those like people at the time, like William, uh, uh, Billy Wilder, William Wyler, all those like big Hollywood directors that were just making like one classic movie after the other. He was
Yeah.
definitely not one of those guys. Yeah.